Luke 10, 1 through 42. Devotional focus verse. And Jesus answered and said unto her, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful, and Mary hath chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her. Luke 10, 41 to 42. Several months ago at a Bible study, our teacher set a large glass jar on a table in front of the audience. Then she removed some large stones from a sack and proceeded to fill the jar to the brim, commenting as she did so that the stones represented priorities in our lives. When there was no more room in the jar, she asked us if the jar was full. We all nodded that yes, it was. She opened the sack again and withdrew handful after handful of small pebbles which she put into the jar, shaking it so that the small stones fell between the larger ones. When she could get no more in, she asked again if the jar was full. Again, we agreed that it was. Finally, she took out a container of sand and proceeded to pour that over the large rocks and the smaller pebbles. For the third time, we agreed that the jar was full. Then she explained that the jar was like our lives. The large rocks were the most important parts of our lives, our relationship with God, our families, our responsibilities as Christians. The pebbles represented things that matter to us, our jobs, our homes, our personal interests. The sand represented everything else. She pointed out that if she had filled the jar first with sand, or even with pebbles, there would have been no room for the larger stones. It is important to put first things first. Priorities play a part in almost everything we do, beginning the moment we wake up each day. If we value sleep more than breakfast, we may choose to sleep in. If we want good grades in school, we do our homework. If we want to save money, we pack a lunch rather than going out. How we spend our time is a reflection of our priorities. Many times at work, I have been given a list of tasks to do, and sometimes I must ask which is most important. While all the tasks are necessary, if I place too much emphasis or invest too much time on the wrong project, my productivity may suffer. In today's text, we read of a woman named Martha who welcomed Jesus and his disciples into her home. In an effort to show honor and be a good hostess, she spent much time preparing food and serving her guests. Meanwhile, her sister Mary sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. Martha was perturbed because Mary was not helping her, but Jesus explained that while Martha was busying herself with more than was necessary, Mary was spending her time wisely. Note that what Martha was doing wasn't wrong in and of itself. Certainly it is appropriate to care for the needs of one's guests, but Jesus pointed out that Martha's priorities were misaligned. She had placed too much importance on the details of this life and not enough importance on spiritual matters. We must be careful to not fall into the same trap Martha fell into. Most of us have many responsibilities that require our attention and time commitments we must honor. Among all our activities, however, we must be careful to keep our relationship with the Lord as the top priority. Often we do not have control over all the aspects of our daily schedule. But if we truly want the Lord to be first in our lives, we must honor Him with our time. In return, He will be faithful to reward our commitment to Him. Background information. Chapter 10 of Luke's Gospel can be broken into three main sections: the mission of the 70 in verses 1 through 24, Jesus' discussion with the lawyer and the parable of the Good Samaritan in verses 25 through 37, and his stay in Bethany at Mary and Martha's house in verses 38 through 42. Today's text opens with Jesus appointing 70 disciples. The number 70 had special significance to the Jewish people. For example, 70 elders were appointed by Moses to judge the children of Israel. See Exodus 24:1 and Numbers 11:16. And the Sanhedrin had 70 members plus the high priest. Jewish tradition also held that there were 70 peoples or nations other than the Jews, so possibly the number of disciples sent out was symbolic of an effort to reach all of those nations. Jesus specified that these disciples were to travel in groups of 2 rather than individually. In pairs, they could not only support and encourage each other, but could also verify one another's account. According to the law, at least 2 witnesses were required to establish something as true. See Deuteronomy 19:15 and Matthew 18:16. In verse 25, a lawyer asked Jesus what he needed to do to inherit eternal life. In that era, a lawyer was a scribe or person of a similar occupation who studied the law. Thus, when Jesus asked what was in the law, this man was well able to answer. When the lawyer asked Jesus who his neighbor was, Luke said he sought to justify himself. See verse 29. According to the law, a neighbor was defined specifically as a fellow Israelite. See Leviticus 19:18. The lawyer likely expected Jesus to refer to this definition, and his righteousness in this area would thus be shown. Instead, Jesus related the story known as the parable of the Good Samaritan. At that time, many priests lived in Jericho, possibly as many as 12,000. And the road Jesus referred to in his parable was the main road between there and Jerusalem. The surrounding area was frequented by many thieves, making Jesus' parable especially relatable. When the priest and Levite passed by the injured Jew, they were in direct contradiction of the law, which commanded that they have compassion on their fellow men. See Deuteronomy 22:1-4. Samaritans, on the other hand, were cultural enemies of the Jews, making the compassion of the Samaritan in the parable all the more remarkable. In the previous chapter, Luke had recounted that Jesus was rejected in a Samaritan village. See Luke 9:52-53. Nevertheless, Jesus clearly showed that even the Samaritans were deserving of love and mercy. When asked who was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves, the lawyer's prejudice prevented him from explicitly responding the Samaritan. Instead, he referred to him simply as he that showed mercy upon him. See verse 37. Chapter 10 closes with the account of Jesus' visit to the home of Mary and Martha. In verse 39, we read that Mary sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. She was listening intently and was seated in the same position that Jewish scholars sat when learning from rabbis. In verse 42, Jesus tells Martha that only one thing is needful. This seems to indicate that the good part chosen by Mary, learning from Jesus, was that one needful thing. However, some commentators suggest that Jesus was saying that only one simple meal was necessary, as opposed to the excess Martha was preparing, to which he had just referred in the previous verse. In either case, Jesus' point was clear. The things of God are of far more importance than temporal things. Conclusion. As we go about fulfilling our many daily responsibilities, may we never allow anything to become more important to us than Jesus.
Luke chapter 10. After these things the Lord appointed other 70 also, and sent them 2 and 2 before his face into every city and place, whither he himself would come. Therefore said he unto them, The harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he would send forth laborers into his harvest. Go your ways, behold, I send you forth as lambs among wolves. Carry neither purse, nor scrip, nor shoes, and salute no man by the way. And into whatsoever house ye enter, first say, Peace be to this house. And if the Son of Peace be there, your peace shall rest upon it, if not, it shall turn to you again. And in the same house remain, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his hire. Go not from house to house. And into whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you, eat such things as are set before you. And heal the sick that are therein, and say unto them, The kingdom of God is come nigh unto you. But into whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you not, go your ways out into the streets of the same, and say, Even the very dust of your city, which cleaveth on us, we do wipe off against you, notwithstanding be ye sure of this, that the kingdom of God is come nigh unto you. But I say unto you, that it shall be more tolerable in that day for Sodom, than for that city. Woe unto thee, Chorazin! Woe unto thee, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works had been done in Tyre and Sidon, which have been done in you, they had a great while ago repented, sitting in sackcloth and ashes. But it shall be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon at the judgment, than for you. And thou, Capernaum, which art exalted to heaven, shalt be thrust down to hell. He that heareth you heareth me, and he that despiseth you despiseth me, and he that despiseth me despiseth him that sent me. And the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Lord, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name. And he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Notwithstanding in this rejoice not, that the spirits are subject unto you, but rather rejoice, because your names are written in heaven. In that hour Jesus rejoiced in spirit, and said, I thank thee, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that thou hast hid these things from the wise and prudent, and hast revealed them unto babes, even so, Father, for so it seemed good in thy sight. All things are delivered to me of my Father, and no man knoweth who the Son is, but the Father, and who the Father is, but the Son, and he to whom the Son will reveal him. And he turned him unto his disciples, and said privately, Blessed are the eyes which see the things that ye see. For I tell you, that many prophets and kings have desired to see those things which ye see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which ye hear, and have not heard them. And, behold, a certain lawyer stood up, and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answering said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right, this do, and thou shalt live. But he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, And who is my neighbor? And Jesus answering said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. And went to him, and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Which now of these 3, thinkest thou, was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, He that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go, and do thou likewise. Now it came to pass, as they went, that he entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, which also sat at Jesus' feet, and heard his word. But Martha was cumbered about much serving, and came to him, and said, Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore that she help me. And Jesus answered and said unto her, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things. But one thing is needful, and Mary hath chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her.